The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, known as Saudia, is currently facing an economic crisis that has raised concerns both domestically and internationally. This crisis has been primarily driven by the sharp decline in oil prices, which has had a significant impact on the country's economy. As one of the world's largest oil producers, Saudi Arabia heavily relies on oil revenues to support its budget and fund various development projects. However, the global oversupply of oil and a decrease in demand due to the COVID-19 pandemic have led to a substantial drop in oil prices. This has resulted in a significant decrease in Saudi Arabia's oil revenues, putting immense pressure on its economy. The decline in oil prices has forced the Saudi government to take measures to mitigate the economic impact. One of the key steps taken was the introduction of an austerity program aimed at reducing government spending and diversifying the economy. This program included subsidy cuts, tax increases, and the implementation of new economic reforms. Furthermore, the Saudi government has been actively seeking foreign investments and partnerships to attract capital into the country. Initiatives such as Vision 2030, a long-term plan to reduce dependence on oil and diversify the economy, have been introduced to encourage private sector investment and stimulate economic growth. Despite these efforts, the economic crisis in Saudia has resulted in various challenges. One of the major challenges is the rising unemployment rate, particularly among the youth. The government's austerity measures and economic reforms have led to job cuts in certain sectors, exacerbating the unemployment problem. Additionally, the economic crisis has put pressure on the government's ability to provide social welfare programs and subsidies, which has resulted in increased living costs for the population. This has led to public discontent and calls for greater economic reforms that prioritize the well-being of the people. To address these challenges, the Saudi government has been implementing various initiatives to stimulate economic growth and create job opportunities. These include investments in non-oil sectors such as tourism, entertainment, and technology, as well as the development of mega projects like NEOM and the Red Sea Project. Saudi Arabia's planned mega city at a cost of some $500 billion is a key part of the kingdom's Vision 2030 plan. The Saudi Arabia, the biggest oil exporter in the world, the drop in oil revenues has left a big hole in its budget. It's a fact that Saudi Arabia is gradually running out of money. There will be the first to acknowledge that the sovereign wealth fund has been reduced somewhere below $500 billion. The $500 billion project is part of efforts to free the kingdom from its dependence on oil. On 10th of January 2021, the Saudi Conference Mohammed bin Salman made the grand announcement for the plan of the Lion City of Saudi Arabia. This is by far one of the craziest projects ever witnessed by mankind, and while most people are fascinated by the grandeur of the Neon City, what we fail to see is that this is Saudi Arabia's desperate attempt to cope up with an economic nightmare of the richest nations in the world is facing an economic nightmare that is hidden in plain sight. The question is, what is hidden problem with Saudi Arabia? What is this Neon or Lion City all about? How is Neon meant to rescue Saudi Arabia, and why do people think Neom is meant to fail the state of Saudi Arabia? To understand the importance of the vision of the Neon City, we first have to understand the economic scenario of Saudi Arabia. The core reason why Saudi Arabia is super powerful is because it is the second largest producer of oil in the world. And more importantly, it also has the second largest oil reserve in the world. And lastly, in terms of trade and security, it has a security guarantee from the United States and is the leader of the oil monopoly group of OPEC. Now the question we heard is, when Saudi has so much oil and is also the leader of the OPEC, why exactly are they in trouble? It looks like Saudi Arabia is a super rich, super chill country, isn't it? What here are the most disastrous economic parameters that most people don't know about Saudi Arabia? The global oil prices in market and the price at which Saudi Arabia can sell actually break even. Since 2015, the oil prices have never crossed a break-even point at all, and assuming that the break-in point is still the same, it is only in the past 2 years post-covered and after the Russian invasion that Saudis are profiting from oil trade, and that is because the oil prices have shot up. This is the reason why the Southeast wouldn't hesitate to support Russia to keep the war going. Secondly, 4 out of the 6 biggest oil buys in the world intend to achieve net zero targets by 2050. The demand for oil will slow down. The cost of renewable energy has already started dropping below the fossil fuel levels. So with 46% of Saudi Arabia's GDP coming from oil itself by 2050, when the oil price drops below $50 a barrel, it will no longer be viable for Saudi Arabia to sustain on oil. This is the second and the most obvious problem for Saudi Arabia. The third problem that they have is their growing domestic economic indicators as of 2020. Although Saudi had 65% of its population under the age of 30, although 58% of this population Had a college degree, 63% of its population under 30 was unemployed. So like countries, Saudi has an educated but unemployed population. So the bigger problem over here is no social scheme can actually fix it. These are the three major problems faced by Saudi Arabia, which are nowhere very less profit from oil, which forms 46% of its GDP. Slowing oil demand, the rise of renewable energy, and lastly a severe dearth in opportunities for the youth of Saudi Arabia. So in short, Saudi Arabia desperately needs a diversification project that can make it economically viable in the future, and will give future opportunities to the citizens of Saudi Arabia. This is one of the most important reasons Mohammed bin Salman came up with the grand plan of the Neon City. As this announcement was made, the entire world was shocked to see the cost, grandeur, audacity and the vision of Mohammed bin Salman. The most ambitious project on earth has been built as humanity's. In October 2017, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman revealed his vision for a new future. Massive size, 170 kilometers, no cars, no roads, launching and breaking ground on the world's most revolutionary cities and destinations. Neom is building what the world's been waiting for. This new city is a huge city which will stretch from the Red Sea to the city of Tabuk. And the peculiarity of this project is that this city will only be 200 meters wide, but 170 kilometers long and 500 meters above the sea level, and Neom will eventually accommodate 9 million people, and will be built on a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. The features of this city will blow your mind. Number 1, all essential daily needs can be met within 5 minutes of walking from any corner of the city, which will completely reduce the dependency on transport, and the goal is to have 0 cars in the city. Secondly, the city transport system will be seamlessly integrated with artificial intelligence. Thirdly, it will have no roads, no cars, no emissions, and will run on 100 renewable energy sources. And lastly, Neom will produce over 600,000 tons of sustainable food to help Saudi achieve self-sufficiency with food. What exactly is the thought behind this project? Well, the first and perhaps the most important factor is its geography. The Neon City will lie along Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coastline, adjacent to the beautiful views of Gulf of Aqaba, and near the Suez Canal, where maritime trade routes exist. And this is not some ordinary location at all. This is by far one of the most valuable locations in the world. Why? Because as of 2021, approximately 12% of the entire global trade passed through the Suez Canal. And this represents 30% of all global container traffic and over $1 trillion worth of goods per annum. Also, this location falls at the center of 3 continents, which are Asia, Europe and Africa. And more importantly, the Neon City is located in such a strategic location that it can be reached by an 8-hour flight by 70% of the world's population. This is what makes it the perfect location to build an air transshipment hub. So as the oil price drops further and aviation fuel becomes cheaper, air cargo will become cheaper. So if they build a high-grade facility to board and manage air traffic, it's going to be a very solid stream of income for Saudi Arabia. This is where people have something called the Neom Bay Airport, which has already been opened up. Secondly, the topography and climatic characteristics of the new home area have a unique blend of pristine nature, dramatic mountain backdrops, which are covered with snow during winter, uninterrupted coastline with untouched beaches and coral reefs, several spectacular islands, peaceful deserts, mild temperatures, Red Sea breezes, and above all, the beautiful views across the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea. This is what makes the Line City one of the most valuable tourist destinations in the world, provided the tourism ecosystem is set up. This will be a year-round tourism destination with a man-made freshwater lake. On top of that, Troyana will have a natural reserve, hiking routes, mountain hiking trails, and even water sports that will take place on this man-made freshwater lake. And then we have something called, and this project is all about entertainment. It includes a Six Flags theme park, a golf course and arts complex, one of the largest water theme parks in the world. Similarly, they have the Jira Tower coming up, which will be the world's tallest building that's going to be taller than Burj Khalifa. By 2030, Qiddiya hopes to drop to 17 million visitors annually, and now to accommodate these tourists and other ultra-rich people. There are some massive projects like the Red Sea project that will comprise of 50 resorts offering up to 8,000 hotel rooms, and more than 1,000 residential properties across 22 islands and 6 inland sites. This entire project will also feature mountain canyons, dormant volcanoes and ancient cultural heritage sites. So in total, it is expected to generate 22 billion reals or $5.85 billion of revenue annually by 2030. And 464 billion reals or $123 billion in cumulative revenue throughout its construction cycle. It is also expected to support 70,000 jobs like this. They also have something called the Amala project. which will add 2,500 hotels, 700 private residential villas, along with a retail area featuring 200 outlets. They also have multiple projects to create employment and diversify Southeast economy to prevent itself from sinking. Here's where we have the final element of the Neon City, which is business and the vision of turning Neon into a world-class business hub. In simple words, just like in Dubai, businesses will be given tax rebates so that they can set up their hubs in Neon. And when 10 years down the line, when Saudi Arabia charges them taxes, Saudi Arabia can make money out of corporate taxes. This project's total area is slated to be 26,500 kilometers. And will link Jordan and Egypt via Saudi territory. Eventually, it is expected to generate 380,000 jobs and contribute $48 billion to the kingdom's GDP by 2030. This is the grand diversification plan of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so this looks like a promising project. Saudi has a ton of money and has some of the richest people like Marsha Sun and powerful companies like Blackstone backing up, and more importantly, it is being fueled by the booming oil economy of 2022. So this is fantastic. Well, unfortunately, things are not so good for Saudi Arabia. The question is why. Firstly, the website very boldly says that it's going to have 100 renewable energy sources powering the entire city. And it will also be food sufficient, but the sad fact is that Saudi Arabia as of 2020 imported 80% of its food from 157 countries. In fact, Saudi is so far away from food self-sufficiency that the Saudi government is now buying and leasing lands in other countries. They're also buying agricultural companies from all across the world just so that they can import food from those locations and have food security in Saudi Arabia. This is because of the massive water shortage problem that Saudi has, and this water shortage is again the second point of skepticism. There are only 18 countries in the world that do not have rivers, and most of these countries are small island countries. But Saudi Arabia is so huge, even then Saudi Arabia does not have a single river at all. Saudi Arabia runs on two fluids, water and oil. Overused demographic and economic pressure could push Saudi Arabia's water supply to its limit. The Middle East is rich in oil reserves, providing a huge amount of the world's energy. But it has an abundance in hydrocarbons it lacks in, a critical resource that is growing scarcer by the year. Water. Even the population of Saudi is so unevenly distributed, the majority of the people live near the sea. And except for Yar, there is no other area with a dense population. Currently, the way they are fulfilling more than 50% of their water requirement is by a process called water desalination. The problem with this process is that it is extremely toxic and requires a lot of oil, which leads to a lot of carbon emissions, which is against the very principles of Neon City. Currently, Saudi Arabia's desalination plants produce about 31.5 million cubic meters of contaminated water each day. That volume of liquid is equivalent to about 20 million barrels of oil per day, and most of this is pumped back into the ocean, which again leads to massive pollution. Saudi Arabia is also classified as one of the most water-scarce nations on the planet. You'll be shocked to know that the absolute water scarcity level is said to be 500 cubic meters per capita. But Saudi Arabia only has 89.5 cubic meters per capita per year. So alone with food sufficiency, how will NEOM achieve water sufficiency using clean methods? That itself is a big question. While most people think desalination can be done using renewable energy, the harsh truth is that as of now it's extremely difficult and almost impossible. Lastly, while Saudi aims for 15% of the electricity to be generated with renewable energy by 2030, only about 0.1% of electricity was generated this way in 2019. If they don't go green, they can still use oil to grow their business for investors. That's not really possible. Why? Because beyond 2040 we'll be seeing the rise of something called carbon powder tax. Which means if you are emitting carbon emissions beyond, let's say 100 million tons, then whatever goods or services that you are going to offer in the market will incur a carbon tax. When you ship this to other countries, this will soon be applicable for all goods and services. So by default, due to carbon emissions, your product and service will become extremely costly in the international market, so no company or investment fund would like to invest in a place that cannot grow green. This is the reason why people say Saudi claims are not backed up by practical plan of actions, and $500 billion of investment might just be a distant dream. Another looming threat for Saudi Arabia is its debt problem. You see, as the world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia traditionally has had no need to borrow money at all, but since 2015, as the oil prices dropped below the break-even point, Saudi Arabia has been accumulating more and more debt, and it's only after COVID recovery and the Russia-Ukraine war. Saudi's debt to GDP ratio has actually started dropping down, and like I said, this is because of the increase in oil prices. If you look at their foreign reserves, they have depleted by a massive margin after the oil prices went down. This is how sensitive the Saudi economy is, so if trillions of dollars are needed to fund the Vision 2030 projects, and if any of them go wrong, it's going to cost Saudi both money and reputation, both of which they cannot afford to play with as a world becomes oil-free. In conclusion, the Saudi economic crisis, fueled by the decline in oil prices, has posed significant challenges for the country. The government's efforts to diversify the economy and attract investments are crucial in overcoming these challenges and ensuring sustainable economic growth. However, the road to recovery remains challenging, and further reforms and investments will be necessary to alleviate the impact of the crisis and secure the future of the Saudi economy. If you learned something, please make sure the like button for more videos and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching.